Yeah, and got it. Yeah, learning theory as such describes how students receive, process, and retain knowledge during learning. So there, if you go on Google Scholar, you can find masses of studies regarding learning theory, and I will, as I said, just present you the very basic stuff. But it is really, really impactful, and I hope that you will find most of the theories again in your everyday life when you, yeah, after this presentation. So in learning, there are especially 4 principles. On the next slide, thank you. So these 4 principles are classical conditioning, operant conditioning, cognitive and social learning, as well as observational learning. So what are these principles? So classical conditioning is, so that's a very, very famous experiment by Pavlov's dog. Maybe you have heard of these. So basically you have a stimulus that has no meaning at all, like the ringing of a bell. And then on the other hand, you have an unconditioned stimulus. For example, that's something like yeah, like that bell. And during the experiment, so first of all, when the bell rings, nothing happens for the dog. It won't raise its appetite. But when it gets food and at the same time the ring bells, then the dog is classically conditioned, and always when in the future the bell will ring, he will get more appetite. And that's also something that you can see in gamification, for example, when you would always get get a response when you do a certain behavior, then you learn to implement that behavior. Yeah, and then there's also operant conditioning. It's similar to classical conditioning, just more complicated. I think maybe maybe we won't need it. Would you be interested in that, or should I go on? Okay, so basically it's very similar to classical conditioning, just basically with the difference that random behaviors are also punished or rewarded. And yeah, and then there's cognitive and social learning. And that's really interesting because before, with classical conditioning and operant conditioning, we had the phenomenon that you yourself were the subject of learning. And now with cognitive and social learning, these theories also show that just by thinking about an a subject, or just by watching others, or just by just by watching, just by interacting with others, you can actually learn. And the social learning is really impactful. So together with others, we learn best. And lastly, observational learning. That was really interesting because this experiment with Albert Bandura showed an example where a man would hit a doll, and afterwards the children that watched that video, they wouldn't wanted to interact with that evil man anymore. So that was really interesting, that just by observing somebody do something, that children would learn about, for example, the characteristics of a person. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, I will talk more about what we can take from that to our gamification purpose later. So another really interesting subject in learning theory is that it is divided into how children learn and how adults learn, because yeah, we are here interested in adult learning. And there are certain requirements. So this is now a little bit more advanced, not the theories are not that basic anymore. And one really nice paper is from Tunyela and Häkkinen from 2005. And what they found out was that 6 factors were really important in relation to adult learning. And that was that what was learned is based on knowledge. So for example, if you learn a new language and you just learn it digitally or via a gamification, then it was really then it was interesting that the learner's experience played a big role. So if you started with existing knowledge in the field, your increase in knowledge was significantly better than when you started at 0. So yeah, so it is for our game. Or I will talk about that later, but it is important that you start with some knowledge of the user. And then reflection is also key for learning. That, as you said in the beginning, what learning is about you finding patterns and understanding them. That's also here the case, that learning is actually a reflexive process, and that, for example, with questions, the user of the app and the learner has to get the possibility to reflect on the learned contents. Yeah, then social learning is actually key. There are even studies that state that you have to have some form of social learning, because apparently we only learn in interaction or observation of each other. So there's, yeah, so there are also studies that say that it only plays a major role, but it's not like yeah, that's not necessarily needed. But if you want to learn well, you have to have some form of social learning. Yeah, and that's why optimal adult education also should involve some social processes and interactions, or even competitions. Yeah, so something like that would be really good. And it should also be problem-based. So yeah, I'll finish in a second. It should also be problem-based. So for example, the if it's too general, we can't learn. So we need to learn on certain problems, on certain examples. And then it's also important, I said target to that, but what is meant by that is to tell the user the goal of the process. It, on the one hand, it helps to order what is learned into the existing knowledge. And on the other hand, this significantly drives intrinsic motivation and motivation in general. So if you tell the goal to the participant, to the user, this yeah, is of huge benefit for the learning process. And then lastly, also flexibility is key. So some form of personalization, and that you can learn when you want and where you want, and yeah, that you have some form of flexibility in there, and that you're not forced to learn, because that would be counter. That would not be good. So now the key takeaways for our educational game. Thank you, Søren. Yeah, so based on these 6 ideas from Tunyela and Häkkinen, I derived with some suggestions for us. So first of all, for the starting point, yeah, it would be really impactful if we knew what the people on what the users already know. For example, if they are from the banking industry, then we could set a certain standard, or if they're from fintechs, or if they are students, then we would have to set a different standard. So yeah, it would be important to base the game on the existing knowledge of the user. Then we could implement questions to support the reflection process, and yeah, put in parts where an active reflection is asked. Some form of flexible learning would be great in form of modules, for example, and also time flexibility. Yeah, then for example, like a clear problem statement would be great during the example, like a specific problem. For example, the escape room games were very popular recently, and the problems that you solve there are also very specific, very oriented on one specific problem. So that would be just an example for how that could be implemented. And yeah, then displaying the goal of the app, what are our intentions, and what are the intentions of the company that maybe uses the game. Yeah, to understand the goal and also value the benefits of the Dilemma project as a user. And lastly, and most importantly, social learning. So some forms of interactions would be really key. Yeah, thank you. So regarding the last slide.
I'm sorry, Katarina.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but thank you so much for
you wanted to be here, right?
Yeah, I want to be there.
Good.
Wow, I didn't realize it is that chaotic. Yeah, great. But now you can see the last slide, and it is quite small, but yeah, maybe I can send you the slides afterwards. Then you can zoom in and have a look at it more closely. Because I thought in the end of this look into learning from a psychological view, I wanted to give you some insights into gamifications from a yeah, actually, yeah, kind of from a psychological view, but also more general. Yeah, so very shortly, the definition of gamification is the technique of using game mechanisms in non-game instances to increase efficiency, customer loyalty, or engagement. So this is also about motivation and engaging. So maybe something that we can keep in mind just to make the process more fun. Yeah, gamification should also remove frictions, and this is also where learning comes in. So it should ease the learning and also increase motivation. And yeah, what I thought was really interesting is that it actually feeds human needs, and it feeds quite some needs, like the need for self-actualization and esteem and belonging. And yeah, you have some quests, you can discover new areas, you get points, you can compare yourself to your peers, you get a status, you have achievements, and you also have social cohesion. And yeah, so gamification is also important. And then I also looked at some gamification elements and wrote them down, like narrative storytelling, immediate feedback, a form of fun. I mean, fun is quite general, but then yeah, then scaffolded learning. So this is basic, also what we saw in the basics of learning, that you base your learnings and the journey in your gamification on a certain level of already existing knowledge. And yeah, there are quite some other gaming elements. Yeah, and also we had some underlying psychological principles, like reward status, achievement, self-expression, and different gamification elements refer and make use of these psychological principles. Yeah, so lastly, I would like to ask you 2 questions. So what insights do you believe are most useful for our process now, for our workshop? And do these learning insights fit with your experience with games?
Can I suggest we take the discussion that you're pointing to, Katarina, after Thomas' presentation?
Yeah.
And I think this was extremely insightful, Katarina. Thank you so much for it. We'll get back to you. And sorry for sort of breaking up the flow here. I really loved your presentation and the work that you've done, and extremely relevant for us going forward. So thank you very much. And we'll get back to you and the questions that you pointed to. But Thomas has actually joined us. And Thomas has been delayed by something I recall very, very well. A 1-year-old. They do develop sort of my 1-year-old, or he used to be. Yeah. Oh, great. Wonderful. So mine is now a bachelor in cyber technology. So but that's wonderful. I see the challenge. That is real life.
Yeah. I brought her just so that everybody will forgive me, because it's much easier to forgive my tardiness when I bring a baby. Even though I can't blame her for this one. She was sleeping and I was grading and lost in the fun of it. But now she's up.
She's beautiful.
Thank you.
And she's smiling. So she looks very, very happy. So that's good.
Yeah. She'll be 1 year at the end of the week.
Oh, congratulations. This is good.
Okay.
So what can we no, we can't I was just about to offer that we could hold her while you were talking, but I think that so we're not that advanced on online yet.
Yeah. So should I start? I just I'm very excited to be invited, just because Soren kind of randomly found me, and as an academic, there's nothing more rewarding than having someone read or engage with what you do. So that's just a thrilling opportunity for me to chat for a few minutes about things that I love. She will turn into a pumpkin in 10 minutes or so, and I have to take care of her. So I will be going. But I just wanted to share my passion for using game design principles and ideas in teaching, and specifically in my experience, specifically has been with teaching ethics. That's my field. So I know some of you are interested in it. I'm actually been teaching a tutorial. This is the 3rd year I'm teaching a tutorial on the ethics of tech and ethics for the future, where my former advisor at Stanford, Rob Reich, has been working a lot on. So he's one of my inspirations for this. So I'm sure a lot of you are interested in these questions. I'll show you the slides from this talk I gave online. That's online. It's actually a little dated, because when I gave that, and when I was working and teaching exclusively in person, and now I teach exclusively online. I teach at Minerva University, which is completely online. Our students live together, so they don't take classes from their kitchen table, but they move around the world, and we are the ones teaching remotely. So I find I can talk a little bit, if you're all interested, in a short Q&A about the differences between doing that online rather than in person. Though the way I'm going to talk about it now is about teaching in person, which I think is what, correct me if I'm wrong, Soren, is what a lot of you are interested in how to use game design principles for teaching in person.
Exactly.
I know.
So that's just to say, we've shared your profile, and I think all who are here know who you are. So I won't take time away from your daughter introducing you and all that. And yes, we are looking at making a board game, making a sort of a workshop type game, and then an online game as learning platforms based on the work that we've done over the past year in conducting a global risk scan of what might go wrong when the financial sector uses technology. And we're acutely aware that financial sector needs guidelines and all that, but they really need learning. They need to promote a culture of responsible digital leadership. They need to learn how to sort of relate to those risks, and that includes a discussion about ethics and impact and understanding that kind of technology. So yes.
Yeah, so I will say that the first insight I come from is first a personal obsession with board games. I love board games of many variety. I have some behind me. I have more downstairs. I play them online. I really enjoy them. And as I was doing my dissertation, writing about democratic theory and things of that sort, and of course, my wife would always make fun of me that I was writing like a semi-dissertation about game design just to procrastinate on my own dissertation on democratic theory. So I became kind of interested and obsessed. So I can't say that the way it came is by really just inspired research, but I found that board games are incredibly engaging for people, and especially young people, right? They love it. And of course, in class, we struggle to get our students engaged often. Specifically with ethics, we want them to talk about things as if they care about them for real. We don't want them to talk about it hypothetically in class. Oh, I would do this for sure. No, I want them to really engage in decision making. So that's where it comes. I started creating these like active learning exercises, and gamification and the literature I read was all about video games. All of it was about video games, and I like video games. They're fine. I mean, it's not a beef. I think they're cool. But one thing that I found is that board games are a lot like the classroom environment, right? You have groups of 4, 5, 6 people around a table. You have very low tech stuff like cardboard, paper, dice, things that are real fun and really engaging. So that's what I started for, super low tech. And I'll show you some of the things I've done. If you've seen it online, I apologize. This is, again, old stuff. I have moved all of these things actually into online stuff. I just don't have it as easily available to share. So the idea was, is this what you're seeing now? I'm not used to Zoom because we have our own kind of thing. So do you see my slides, right? Okay, great.
Yeah,
so the idea was to get students engaged and having fun. And so I kind of took my interest in study of board game design. Yeah, that's right. That's what I was doing. Yeah. And this thought about ways to get them to make exercises as I was creating my curriculum. So the first thing that I love about games is what I call the golden rule, which is matching theme with mechanics. We know that games work. There's like a big discussion in game design. What comes first, mechanics or theme? Is it story driven? And of course, there's all sorts of extreme, but I personally really love those games that they come together. Things come together. That is, the rules of the game, the interaction of the game, and the story it tells come together. Now, this is really crucial, I think, for teaching because the story, the theme is
what
I can jump in quickly.
There's a small. We can't actually see your screen. Something happened. It sort of got squashed somehow.
Yeah, is that good?
Perfect. That's much better.
It looks good.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry for interrupting you.
No, again, I don't know Zoom very well. Okay, so all I want to say is like the idea is to match theme with mechanics was just to make sure that the rules of the interaction are more match what we're doing. So like a small example from a board game called Lancaster by Matthias Kramer, a very well-known German game designer, is to use simple things like the knights. This is a game about knights. It's like the English Civil War. The bigger knights can push over the smaller knights. That's the rule of the game. That's the mechanical interaction. And the pieces are just larger. And you think to yourself, okay, what's the big idea, right? Well, the big idea is to give students roles that match what we want them to do and give them things to do, decision points that match what they want to do. Now, there's something that I've learned working with a lot of professors and having them run my exercises, which I've done more in the last 3 years than before. When I gave this talk, I was mostly the only one doing it. Game designers are obsessed with mechanics. They really want the game balanced and fair. Instructors don't care about mechanics in the classroom for the most part. They set up rules for the discussion, but they break them to make a point, which I sympathize with as a philosopher. But with games, you gotta have to stick to the rules that you stipulated. You have to put some faith in your mechanics and plan them ahead of time. So this is the golden room for me has become like paying close attention to both of them, right? So for example, if students don't make the choices you wanted them to make, change your choices and the rules and the question you ask. Don't change the game halfway through the classroom, because that's what instructors do. They constantly intervene. The students are not engaging correctly. But then students lose the point. What's the point of engaging in the game if the rules constantly change? So that's another thing. Matching the theme with the mechanics, I always thought about was like creating the mechanics to match the theme, but they're also about, thank you. The savior came. She's actually doing much more important work than I do. So I should go and take over in a moment. But matching the theme with the mechanics with instructors has become to just explain to them how important it is to have mechanics, right? To have some rules for the interaction when you're doing these kind of activities. So what I did in a lot of my exercises, I always give roles. These are cards, as you can see, that I would distribute to students. Now I have online things that look kind of different. And the good thing about online things is you can have a lot more text. And the bad thing is that you don't give something physical for the students to have in mind. But that's partly what I do. So they have a scenario, and often they have a yes and no answer, and they have to make it because that's what determines what happens in the next thing, right? That's what determine what's the result of their elections, whether they're whatever is the thing that is happening. Now, the thing about, so if I'm going too fast or if you have any questions, let me know, but I'm just going to speed through some of these like main ideas and hopefully that will inspire some conversation. The theme is often related to the idea of the magic circle, to get students immersed and engaged, really believe they're there, right? So in the classroom, I would often put on music and have like some kind of, it's amazing how you put on a big screen, you put on a video with some music, how different the atmosphere going on. I also spend time, so yeah, right. This is like, anyway, I'm not going to get into all of these things, but this is what I do with in-person classes. I have students draw their characters, make up names, role play, right? And that kind of stuff really puts them in the situation. Now, there's a danger in that too, that I have really come to engage in with it. With ethical questions, students may sometimes create fake or false characters and then would be like, oh, I was just playing out what a shepherd would do. I wasn't being myself. Of course, I wouldn't do that, right? So there's a thin line that you have to play with how much engagement you get as the expense of how much they can distance themselves from the decision, because I want them to be there. So Katrina mentioned escape rooms. One thing that's great about escape rooms, I took my son for the first time, my older son, for the first time to an escape room. He was scared. And it was a great escape room in terms of immersion. It was so scary. Like, we had to tell him the door is not locked. We can leave if you wanted to, right? The pirates were really scary. So you want to have some of that so that people will get, I love it. So I'll give you one story that I had. Like I have this democracy simulation that I love to run. I call them simulation, but they're games basically. The reason I call them simulation, by the way, is that there's no winner. There's no end result. It's not like a psychological experiment. A lot of my friends who teach psychology, they run these exercises where at the end they can tell the student, aha, you were all stupid. You all were irrational. You all did what I expected. I laid a trap and you all fell into it. My games, I don't have a result I want to have. I have a democracy simulation. I give them roles. Sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't. And it's interesting either way. We can debrief it. So in the democracy simulation, I had a couple of years ago in Greece with Greek students, a natural, populist leader arising. So there was someone who was a builder. She was like a commoner. She had no political special role, but she was frustrated. People weren't listening to her. She said, I have this great knowledge. I can tell you how to build the city. And they're like, whatever, we have our own interests. We don't care. And so she was like, you know what? The mayor is corrupted. She just invented an accusation of corruption. And everyone believed her because they were like, oh, it's Greece. The mayors are all corrupted. So they fired the mayor. And they followed all of her proposals. So she completely made up an accusation, got everyone on board, and kind of got a lot of popular. So it was a great, beautiful moment that I had never anticipated. Of course, going forward, I introduced a bunch of rumors about corruptions of the officials into the simulation. So next time I ran it, it was also circulating in the bloodstream of the simulation. But that's the kind of stuff that I am after, right? You want people to actually be there. She got frustrated. People weren't listening to her. So she did what she would do in this situation, right? And she brought up an accusation she thought was plausible, even though she had no evidence. And that's something that actually happens in politics. And the great thing is that for the rest of the semester, I could always call on my populist leader, right, from the class and say, remember that moment? What has happened there? Of course, we looked at populism and all sorts of things in political science. So I want students to be immersed in the magic circle for the activity, but also be themselves. And that's a fine line to walk. Types of conflict games are kind of based on conflict, right? They're competition. But as Katrina beautifully said, actually, in a couple of her points, they don't have to always be strictly competitive. There's a lot of board games that inspired me to do a lot of cooperative games and even semi-cooperative games, which is my favorite kind. There's a lot of literature and discussion about game design, about how to make them well, and maybe they're not very easy to make, and there's all sorts of issues. So don't sweat it too much. I love to divide the class into teams and have them work against each other in some competitions. You get a bit of both, and it's just extremely great. They get motivated to compete, right? But they also need to work together, and you get a ton of engagement all immediately. And all the social aspects that Katrina talked about are engaged right away. So that's something to really think about. And cooperative board games have become amazing in a variety of ways to engage everyone and to solve all sorts of problems, like what game designers sometimes call the alpha gamer problem. In the class, it's the quiet student who doesn't care, doesn't do anything, let everybody else do the work for them. So I often give them role inside the team or give them special information. For example, I did this new simulation where they have negotiation, and there's a corporation team and a social activist team and a politicians team. The politicians are trying to moderate between the corporations and the social activists. And it's really nice because each team has a different internal hierarchy. The corporation has a CEO, and they make all the decisions. The social activist is completely egalitarian. They are all like leaders of different organizations trying to represent the community. And the political system is checks and balances. There's like a Republican governor and a Democratic mayor, because it's in Texas, because that's where I found myself living today. And then they're like at odds with each other, but they also have same interest about solving this conflict because they're both in office and things of that sort. But they all want to get credit for solving the problem, and they don't want the other one to get credit. So there's all this political mess inside the political team. And what I love about it is that there's negotiation. And then when they go into the groups, the corporation is strategizing, the social activist is strategizing, and the politicians fight. They just hate each other. So they fight the whole time in their secret meeting. But what's interesting about this is that often you have groups like the corporation has done this, and they were like, well, the CEO said, but you had special information. Each team member has their own special information. The CEO doesn't know everything. Maybe they have the most information. They definitely have the most power. But a lot of people in their team has information that they don't have, and they need to be able to speak up in their team. And then I put it on the CEO afterwards. I say, why didn't you ask them? You had team members at your disposal, right? Why didn't you get that information? So you have to give special information. I give special information to each team members. And I got this from board games. They give special roles. They give special information to team members in a cooperative game. That's to make everyone engaged and involved. So they have a lot of the same goals we have as teachers. They want everybody around the table engaged. We want everybody around the table engaged. They want people to try to win. We want people to try to achieve something. If we set the goals correctly, we can do it well. So cooperative games, strongly, warmly recommend. Also very good for the family. My son is 7, as I said, doesn't like to lose always. Of course, we do all kinds of games. Cooperative games, we all win and lose together. That's great. By the way, the flip side of the alpha gamer problem or the unengaged student is weaker students can hide behind stronger students a little bit and get pulled forward. If they're quiet because they're actually having a hard time engaging, there's often opportunity for someone to speak for them or to push them forward. So there's a lot of benefits. Of course, there's a lot of pitfalls. We can talk about that, but really useful. Last thing I'll say is just in time rules. Clear rules, very clear rules, specific rules. Again, instructors are horrible at that. Professors, they don't care about rules. They care about substance. I'm with them. The theory is important, but what are the rules of engagement in class? Give them clear and give them when you need them. What do I mean? This is another Euro board game called Terra Mystica. Very, very complicated. You know, a lot of rules, very what people are called heavy Euro game, a ton of rules. But what's beautiful about it, this is your player board. Every time you remove a component from it, it reveals an image underneath that tells you what you need to do at that very moment. So it jogs your memory about what you have to do. What do we instructors do, especially when I was teaching in person and places like Stanford and Harvard? We give the syllabus at the beginning of the semester, we distribute it, everybody throws it in the trash. And then the whole semester long, we get emails. When do we do this? How do we do this? And we reply, it's in the syllabus, it's in the syllabus, it's in the syllabus, right? So we don't give the information when they need it. We don't give them the information when they need it. Also, what's great about here, this is multimodal. So European famously speak more than one language. I know it's a shocking feature to Americans, but you know, in the world, there are people who speak other languages. And so in Europe, they use a lot of imagery for communication. And actually they use multimodal presentation. So things are in language, in the rules, and in images as well. So that's something really important if you want to get it clear to your students what to do. So I like to, instead of the syllabus, giving them all the information up front. I mean, you can do that too, so that they can have it for reference, right? But you also give them the information as they need it. So you don't need to start your class by saying, here's what we're going to do today, and give them all the rules for 20 minutes. You just say, today we're going to do an exercise. You're all competing for campaigns. Go. And then they go to breakouts on Zoom or whatever, or to the little groups. And then they know what they need to do for the first scenario. That's all. They have no idea what's coming up next. And if you're like, how are they going to know how to evaluate ethically? Don't worry, they'll figure it out. If your game is good enough, if they give them the right feedback, they're going to make a terrible decision first scenario. They're going to get slammed by the face, and then they're going to learn, and that's fine, right? So long as you keep to your rules and you're consistent, and the rules are generally fair, that is, you don't change them midpoint, they're not going to blame you. They're not going to blame you. Right? So that's really crucial. Again, instructors change the rules all the time when they get results they don't like. And I have a hard time with my teaching team when I run my exercises with them. I tell them, shut up, don't intervene, stay in the back, let the students mess things around, let them ruin it, let them break it. We'll fix it for the next iteration, or at least you'll learn something from what went wrong, right? So again, I give them those little cards when I was in person. And things of that sort. Right, structure choices. I think I kind of talked about it with like, they have to have specific choices. There's no open-ended questions. What would you do in this? Oh, I would go and talk. No, I need yes or no, right? And in ethics, I think that's important because students like to fight the hypo. They like to make up things. And again, I'm not saying that every decision is dichotomous, black and white, but in many cases, like for example, we did an exercise about propositions in San Francisco. Propositions that were up for vote by citizens, like restricting sugary drinks and tents in the sidewalks and things of that sort. Students would say, I don't support this. I support an alternative proposition that would be better. But that wasn't on the ballot. That one wasn't on the ballot. So do you vote yes or do you vote no? Because if you vote no, your alternative proposition is not going to be proposed anytime soon. This is the moment you can vote on the tent proposition or on the home, on the restricting sugary drinks. Your alternative one was not on the ballot. So you're forcing them to take decisions. I call it, we have hashtag, like we call it like learning outcomes. I call it ethical judgments. I tell my students, you can be undecided about ethical questions. They're very difficult. But for the purposes of the exercise, I want you to take a stance. I want you to practice exercising your ethical judgment, because you're going to have to do it in life. You can't go to the ballot and say, I'm undecided. You can do that, but then you made a choice by not choosing, right? You have to take a choice. All right. What else did I want to tell you? Oh, yes, right. I use randomization devices. I use dice, which is really a bummer online, but I just use like Google or whatever that shows them the dice. That helps make the game feel fair. There are fair outcomes. You can take a risk. I think there's a lot of ethical kind of issues with uncertainty. If you're teaching moral psychology, you want to show prospect theory and all sorts of issues with that, certainty effect, etc. You can deal with that. But I also think You say, hey, it's not me. I'm not giving you an arbitrary choice. You have taken a risk. You knew it's going to be risky. It succeeded or it's not. It's also the case that I always have a group who rolls really hot in the dice. They think they're hot shots. At the end of the game, they say, we won because we made big decisions. And then I can tell them, group B made exactly the same choices and they got slammed. And that's also an important, there's so many things that are really worthwhile. So I use a lot of those. I like them. Again, inspired by role-playing games. If you ever played like Dungeons and Dragons and any of its many kind of imitators or follow-ups, they're all use that, right? There's all these things where you use, and actually I think that's a great way to teach decision theory as well, all sorts of things that are not just ethics, right? Yeah, so just to kind of summarize it, my points, there's a lot to be learned from game design, and specifically for the classroom, for the physical classroom, as well as the online classroom. By the way, board games and video games are merging. If you thought the rise of video games is killing board games, it's the opposite. Board game sales are actually exploding, and they're exploding because people buy the digital implementation of board games on apps or websites. And guess what? That makes them buy the physical board game more than the other way around. Because board games, their greatest hurdle is they did experiments. They put like electrodes on people's skins. The most excited a board gamer is when they play a game is when they open the box. That's the most exciting moment. You see the components, you're excited, it's awesome. The worst moment is picking up the rule book. That's where fun goes to die. You pick up the rule book and you want to die. Now, weird people like me love rule books and love rules. Right? As my wife used to make fun of me, I take rule books to bed because then I read the rules and it clears my mind. I like rules. The world is organized. But actually, even the most avid board games don't like rule books. They don't like spending time reading rules. It's a nightmare. Digital games are great at teaching you the game. But then you have the physical copy where you can really enjoy the tactile physical components of the beautiful game. So it's actually been the case that more and more board game companies, when they issue their board game, they issue a digital implementation with it so that people can play it online, often for a payment, like you pay like a subscription or something, or on Tabletopia, Tabletop Simulator, other things like that. So board game and video games are actually merging. Video games did not kill board games like video killed the radio star or whatever. Actually, radio is doing well. Podcasts are doing well. Didn't die either. All right. So in summary, I wanted to say there's a lot to be learned from game design, board games and video games. Specifically, if you're teaching in person, I think you should look at board games because your classroom and the students around it are people who don't know it, but would love to play a lot of the new board games that are out there if they're not already doing it. Some of the key ideas is you want to create some clear rules. Maybe that should come with before matching theme with mechanics, because a lot of instructors don't think about that. They don't think about the classroom environment as rule-based. They think of it as free-flowing discussion, and that's all. That's one tool. And that one tool you have is to have an open discussion. I have that a lot. Another one is to have a really structured experience that you then debrief. That's really important. Debrief it afterwards, like have that structure experience. So create clear choices, make them match the story, right? So one thing, Katrina mentioned a lot of gamification. I really hate all the gamifications that say, do your homework and you win some cookie points. And then you have a cookie point meter. And when you get to 1,000, you get golden bear cookie points. And if you do that, you can translate into like skins. Like that's all fine. It's kind of nonsense. It's not related to what you're doing, right? You need to practice math to get this. In my activities, it's, as far as I can tell, as I can try to do, the in-game reward are not external. They're in the game, right? The game is built with question in mind. So I think about the ethical decisions that I want them to be making or to be considering for my curriculum goals. And that's what I want them to be doing in the game. I don't want them to be gaining any. So the points that I give are like percentage points in the polls of their election. There's something in the game. So that's matching theme with mechanics. You structure them carefully. You use feedback loops. So you play fair. You play fair with your students. You set the rules in advance. You give them clear rules and you stick to it. And you use randomization device. It's a way to get this fun and it makes it fair. And you try to get it immersive. So students are in the magic circle. That's that's kind of a quick summary. I'm sorry it's disorganized. I haven't given this talk in a little while, and I've had a lot of ideas since I did. And I am very excited Soren invited me. So if you want to have a quick chat or quick Q&A, I'm happy to do so. How do I mute? Where is this gone? Oh,
This was so great. You shouldn't mute yourself. So we this was spot on, perfect. Really grateful for this, Tomer. And my kudos to your daughter for allowing you to speak. So I don't. So if you have just a few minutes for questions, can we ask all for questions to Tomer as he's here and with us? Elise?
I have one. Yeah. This is fantastic. And I have to imagine you must be a very fun professor. I am, as before you came, I've been a reluctant, I don't like games, and you're making me realize that it might be because I tell my kids, follow all the rules except for the dumb ones. And so sometimes I find the, arbitrary rules in a game frustrating. But that aside, my real question is, if the goal around this game, for example, is to change perspectives or influence behavior, is there any evidence out there that these types of games do that?
all right. So my quick shtick is to say you haven't played the right games. And probably if you've played Monopoly and, these are bad games. They're horrible. I mean, they've done even Catan. I mean, I'm a board game snob, so I can't do any of these games. There's so many better games out there that you can engage with. Is there any evidence? So I'm not an expert on that. I can't say that. I have to say I find the literature on the empirical evidence for pedagogy extremely frustrating. Of course, it's very complex to isolate variables and to figure out what exactly works. So I unfortunately only have like kind of anecdotal experience to share with you. Does it change behavior? I mean, I have year after year students mentioning this as the best class they've ever had, like in course evaluation and things of that sort, like noting it. Now, is it because the landscape is a little dreary and dull and that stands out? Maybe. But to me, that's a good reason to use this kind of things, to lift it, to make students think and lighten up. As you noted, I want my classes to be lively. I want students to be through the roof. Like I want them, we have this like mind-blowing emoji. I love to see that. I want them to, and again, I struggle a lot online and I feel like a lot better now. So I think I would say it's not a substitute for teaching, right? It's not a substitute for materials. And one thing I really hate is when instructors do this without debriefing, without doing the discussion afterwards. So I always do this. I always dedicate a lot of time to the debrief to see what we have learned, what has happened here, what's the takeaway. So yeah, I don't know if that's satisfying. I don't have great empirical evidence, but I'm not satisfied with a lot of the empirical evidence that there is out there. I will say the empirical evidence I know of do say, as Katrina mentioned as well, that active learning, problem solving, group work, all of this is extremely good for both engagement and learning. And so we really stay as close to, these are all like my guidance.
Thank you. And I'll try to find better games.
Katarina, you have a question?
Yeah, so actually I'd also love to have you as a professor. You sound so cool. Yeah, so you said, for example, that ethical actions should be in the game. And I was just wondering, because I can imagine that to be so important for us, whether you have some examples for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned my campaign simulation revamped dramatically this year. Politics has changed in the last 3-4 years. I want students to make decisions that are difficult, right? So I give them questions like, your candidate is engaged with sketchy stuff, problematic stuff, a variety of ways. But you're still believing them. They're still like what you think of remote. So I have a variety of things like that. It's always, or in this simulation now, it's always a tension between promoting your candidate whose ideals and positions you think are ethically justified, and undermining the democratic system. So it's money in politics, It's throwing dirt at the opponent. It's procedural stuff in the parliament, things of that sort, right? Now, I have also had in this, so this is the kind of thing I want students to say, how far do you push this, right? And so instead of just asking them hypothetically, I put them in the shoes of like campaign managers, make a bunch of decisions, and then debrief. Why did you do this? Why didn't you do this? And then they say, well, we are the leftists. We are the good guys. Oh, okay. Does that mean that in the other shoes, right? Things of that sort. Another example I'll give you is that I really think worked amazingly well. I've in person, I haven't found a good way to implement it online yet. I always had a whistleblower scenario. So I had one person in the campaign secretly get information about dirt in the candidate, something horrible, not like sketchy. And I tell them, if you tell anybody, this is going to tank your candidate. Your candidate's done if it's going to come out. You're the only one who knows about it. No one in their group knows about it as they're making decisions. They're supposed to be pretending to be engaged in another scenario. And then at the end, I ask them, did you share that leak that information or not? And I make it like there's like a scoreboard with their percentage polls on the board. I would go and mark a huge X. This was the winner until this thing was leaked. And so the team members are all mad at that person sometimes. Like, why did you do that? We were winning. But whistleblower decision making is done in isolation. So again, I want the experience to match what happens in the exercise. So yeah, I have a ton of other examples, but these are something like, I have like presidential things. The boss tells you to do something, or there could be in corporate stuff. They tell you to cover up something. That happens in the game, right? And if you do or don't, that affects what everybody else knows in the exercise.
So we have. Oh, sorry, Katarina.
No, yeah, maybe I was thinking that sounds so interesting, and maybe, I mean, Søren, whether it really fits or not, but maybe would there be a chance that you could share some of these examples with us?
Yeah, I actually put, I have it on the published article. We had an attachment, the simulation as it was 3-4 years ago. Of course, I change the scenarios every time I run it. Yeah, I can send it to you. Just shoot me an email. I'm very slow on email right now until the semester is over, but I will get to it, I promise.
Thanks. So, and we have 3 more questions lined up. So, Rosemary from Nairobi, Strathmore University.
Thank you, and very interesting presentation, and it's actually bringing out so many things that either we've been ignoring or we have to come to reality that gaming is now becoming a methodology, kind of a method of teaching. And so my questions, I've got 3 questions. One, when do you introduce gaming as a method of theory of change? Is it postgrad or undergrad or professor? And your experience as a professor in this kind of techniques, how was it to actually convince the academician that gaming is a tool that can be used to actually bring out solutions and describe the problems? And normally when gaming is introduced, like music, it's like you want to use it to ease your either behavior change or your kind of psychological impact. So, and in many times we see young children, and it was interesting during the COVID and lockdown, you enter into a house and a young child will just take your phone and they go straight to gaming. Nobody teaches them. They understand quickly how to actually do the gaming. So I like what Katrina said, the ethical aspect of gaming. How do we make sure that is attained? But also the values of gaming and when do we use it and how do we understand it? Is it part of the soft side of data or the hard side of data? And when you develop gaming, how do we also copyright and own it? Thank you.
Yeah, the second question is huge. I can't really tackle so many of these issues. I will say that for the first question, where do I introduce it? At any opportunity that I have to implement curriculum. So there's true that there's a lot of reluctance. At Harvard, I had a good buddy who was an ally, an insider, a professor at the Kennedy School who loved it. A lot of faculty did not want to hear about it. And if they don't, they don't. At Minerva, I'm really fortunate to have Minerva University, where I teach now. I'm fortunate to have amazing colleagues who are all very open and very pedagogy focused. So some of them who don't like games as well, Ellis, like you, they try it. And honestly, it's sometimes mixed results. If you don't know and love it, and I struggle a lot because I can a lot of the time make changes on the fly that I didn't write into the instructions and instructor others. So I'm learning how to do better on creating guides and things of that sort. But I would say a lot of people do engage. So I would say I introduce it wherever I can. I think that when I did something mostly undergraduate, because that's what I teach mostly. But when I did some classes over the summer for younger kids, I used a lot of that, and that worked really well. As for the ethics of gaming and children, and that's a huge question. I think it would vary dramatically within context, right? So I mean, I've used very low tech stuff for the most part. I don't use any software, any data, I use spreadsheets. That's the most of what I use. And so I don't have any of these issues. I know that I don't own the curriculum at Minerva, so I don't have any problems with that either. And I mostly do it I'm really passionate about the teaching rather than any of the other stuff. So I don't have the same issues, but you definitely need to adjust it to the age group you're in. So can we do the last two questions together so I could wrap it up?
Martin and Yemisi?
Yes.
Yep.
Sure. Thank you. Mine is a comment and also a question. I took part in a leadership course in 2015, and we had a gaming component where we were in our groups. We were cooking a meal, but it turned out the exercise in cooking the meal was checking who was collaborating, and they would hide ingredients. It was very insightful. And then in my own teaching, in entrepreneurial leadership, the last 2 years, I've done a bit of gaming and asked the students in their group projects to achieve something by the end of the semester. But in reality, I'm trying them to get them to experience what leading as an entrepreneur is. So building on those, I had two questions. What happens when you are operating in a world where there are different value systems, so that people playing the same game, ethics means something different to each of them? And secondly, do you have a debrief component at the end of the game, where after the exercise, maybe somebody walks them through and tells them this is what the right answer could have looked like, or the wrong answer? Is there that post-game interaction? Thank you.
Yemisi?
All right, so mine is more like, okay, so it's also a question, and then also maybe just a brief experience sharing. Okay, so the question I wanted to ask, I think I'll start from there, is to say maybe possibly for us to have a feel of this designing the game. I was thinking, I don't know if it's possible, maybe Toma, if you could have that opportunity, maybe it's something Soren and Elise might consider, to maybe have all of us like sort of be like participants in a game, one of these games that you mentioned, just for us to sit in and play the game, and then we have a feel of how it is. I think it will help us in terms of design, so that when we're sitting as users interacting with the game, it will then help us when we decide to go and design our own game, because we'll be designing it through the eyes of the user, rather than just the eyes of a developer. And then I am also thinking that, I know you mentioned something about the cookie points, that you're really not into it, as it were, like then you're offered the cookie at the end of the session, or at the end of the game. But I was asking, I would like to ask that, is there anything wrong with maybe having a hybrid, something like you could have cookie points embedded in the game, and then plus a debriefing at the end of it, just to sort of consolidate learning. So I'm thinking, instead of throwing out the cookie points entirely, maybe we can have that and then have a debriefing, because I think there's something that has to do with rewards that people sort of like, so I think it encourages them. And then, of course, in terms of experience sharing, I was going to say, well, I didn't run like a kind of sophisticated game like you did. I taught for some time at Pan Atlantic University. I taught marketing to undergrads. So, but we had this game Kahoot that occasionally I would bring in from time to time just to consolidate learning. And they had, music, lots of, background music, upbeat music to just encourage the students, answer the questions. And there was, a very short time frame for them to quickly think about the answers, and then they would be offered maybe like brownie points or something. So I think that in terms of just speaking to Elise's point of, is there some sort of takeaway, like, is there some real learning that takes place? Or, does it lead to behavior change? Well, I mean, it's just like when you sit in the classroom and you listen to lectures, you might not, I mean, the students listen, they now have a choice to make whether they want to accept, the ideas that have been shared, or they still want to go on with it. It boils down to the individual. So but I think that it makes an impact because you tend not to forget, especially when it's made such an impact on you, it's engaged your senses. So that is just, my own experience sharing. But it'll be good for us to sit in and maybe have a feel of the game, because all that is in my head right now as you're speaking is Jumanji. I'm thinking of Jumanji.
Yeah,
I'm
don't think
thinking
about
of I'm
Don't think of
thinking of
Jumanji.
Royal Rumble, Candy Crush, and all that.
Yeah.
That's what's in my head. So that's it, basically. Thank you.
Americans always think about Sorry, which is again a horrible board game. Shoots and Letter, not a game. Okay, so I will say I have to leave soon. So actually, when I did this as a postdoc, that was like one of my projects. We always ran a simulation before the talk, like that was that kind of how it came, right? So I would run like one of my democracy simulations. That's kind of democratic theory was my thing, so I always did like various versions of that. So yeah, so you can talk to Soren about it later. But just quickly to address all these questions, you want to do a hybrid with cookie points? Sure, go for it. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do things. I didn't really want to like talk down on another method. It's something I don't particularly like. If it works for you, or you could do a good hybrid for it, absolutely. I mean, it's not. I would say that's not my approach generally, but it's always sometimes very, very hard to have the points integrated into the game, and so you could do it some other way. That's fine. That's not my approach mostly, but yes, I'm absolutely. Debrief component at the end of the game, Martin, absolutely mandatory. I am obsessed with it. I can talk a lot about it, but I can't right now. I will say my one tip to instructors, that's what I do, and they're not often as satisfied with it, but I think it's really important. Just do a lot of eavesdropping during the exercise and write quotes. That's what I do. I write a bunch of quotes students do, and then I say, you said, that you would rather die than agree to that proposal. Why did you say that? Right? And then I dig into that. Last but definitely not least, Martin's question about different value systems. I mean, I thrive on that. If everybody thinks the same, then it's really hard for me to get anywhere. But teaching ethics, we can talk a lot, but my idea, I call it hashtag ethical considerations. I want students to understand what really matters to them morally. Is there an actual disagreement here on the moral values, or is it a different interpretation of moral values? There's different positions, what's underlying them? How can we dig deeper into that? Was this just moral psychology at work? We got into a conflict where we don't disagree about anything. Are we talking past each other? I mean, it's very difficult territory, so you have to craft it very carefully. I have a very international student body. Now I have Ukrainian students, we have some Russian students, we have Polish students. Like right now at my classes, every time this thing comes up, it's a very, very sensitive topic. In my ethics for tech class, we talked about the Twitter example, and they said they banned Donald Trump from Twitter for inciting violence. And a Polish student said, I think inciting violence is not a good reason to kick someone off of Twitter and social media, because the Ukrainian government should be allowed to incite violence against the Russians. Okay, explosive stuff. So you gotta, this, in my opinion, it happens in every good ethics class. So you need to learn how to deal with it. But I thrive on that. I want that to happen. I want my games to bring up the different ethical perspective. With that, I really have to run. My wife has a super important meeting with a client. I had to let her go. Yep. I apologize for being late. I'm really thrilled you invited me. You seem like a great group. And Soren, maybe we can be in touch to talk about what this group is doing, and we can
Let's do that. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights. This has really been extremely relevant and extremely engaging and just to the point. So yeah, I mean you have to run. So
Okay.
I'll follow up and we'll contact you on what we're doing and talk. Thank you for all of this.
Bye-bye.
Perfect.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. So we are kicked off by two really great talks. First, you, Katarina, thank you so much for sharing your work and your insights and the research that you've done. We'll get back to that, and then Toma on his experiences from developing games and using games in teaching, and it ended up taking a little bit longer than we planned, but that's good. We'll just adapt to that. And so what we're doing here today is simply kicking off a process, right? Where that's not going to end here, but that will sort of involve a lot of work going forward. So we should just look back to you, Katarina, and in relation to your talk, and then I'd love to get sort of the ball rolling. I think we've had a really wonderful start here. I mean, we want to use the learnings that we found, or the research that we found, into something that's fun and compelling as corporate training. I used to work for IBM and for a Danish IT company. I'm not saying anything bad about IBM and Danish tech, but the corporate trainings, all the compliance training we had was awful. And we spent hours and hours and hours doing the most ridiculous online things that was supposed to teach us not to do corruption and not to do this or that we could certainly realize too. And I was always surprised why it had to be so ridiculous and boring and not inspiring, but it all was. And so I mean, we've realized that we have some really interesting research and findings in the work that we've done, and we've also realized that there's a need to get this out here. And I think both your talk, Katarina, and Toma's talk really illustrated that it's possible to do something that's fun and engaging, and that people will actually want to play, and that they can learn from. And I think that there's still a basis here to do the board game we've talked about, and that we'll talk more about today, and then the conference thing and the online thing. The challenge for us here is that we are, especially in relation to the board game, we are trying to develop something that's extremely tactile. Normally when you do prototyping, you use spaghetti and cardboard and rubber bands and put it together and make a machine or something. So we have to do that entire thing on Zoom. And I've found a lot of apps on Zoom, but I haven't found the spaghetti app yet. So we haven't. It's a little bit difficult to integrate elastic rubber bands and spaghetti into this. So we'll have to be a little bit creative, and I think Miro can help us. Andrew has prepared a bit of that, and we'll try and work on. So the idea today is to get us started, to get us rolling on that process, and then we'll work online between us. Maybe we can even have more board games. I mean, it might be that there's a board game with a box of questions on small cards, or there's a big sort of I dare not say after Toma's interaction, say Catan or Monopoly or whatever. But I mean, there's a lot, Jumanji. So whatever comes up. I think a lot of really good ideas also out of this, perhaps also relating a board game with or integrating it with the digital gaming that we are doing. So, but this is all about ideation and getting it up, and then we have a basis to work from. So Siddharth, and then I wanted to loop back to Katarina, and then I wanted to get us into sort of ideation mode and on that. Siddharth?
Yeah, so I actually have to leave for my thesis colloquium, but I was wondering, I mean, because this call will be recorded, like,
Yeah.
you know, the second part. And can I contribute, like maybe go to the Miro board after the call
Exactly.
and when I'm done,
Yeah.
and can also put my thoughts in there, and in the next workshop I can also present further, because I'm also in a very tight deadline these days, because my thesis is due in like 4 weeks. So yeah.
You look remarkably calm, given that you're handing in your thesis in 4 weeks. So that bodes well for your work. So and yes, of course. So the whole thing will be available online. The Miro board will be accessible and so forth. This will be the recording here will be available, and we are available. And so the idea is that we work on this going forward on Miro and on mail and WhatsApp and so forth, and try to get something good. But
yeah, no. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I'll be done with this whole process on 2nd of May. And then I would be like really looking forward to the conference as well, and presenting my findings as well. Really,
then once we have a few ideas, we can sort of establish more firm projects to work on. But as you know, the idea is that we do ideation now. We have some ideas on the Miro, and then we can sort of move into prototyping and then select and see what is it that actually works, and then we'll hopefully have a basis that we can have sort of a real project around, and then start building a game, right? And then we'll reach out to people who can help us with designing, selecting colors and all that, avatars, whatever that you have in a game. Good. Okay.
All right.
Katarina, we left you off a little bit abruptly, so thank you for your talk. You were opening up to a little bit to questions or comments about learning. Maybe we can have sort of a broader talk, just following up a little bit on what Toma was talking about, and then what your insights. Do you want to kick us off with a comment, Katarina, or is there another comment from any of the other participants?
I guess I'll share. One thing that came up during Katarina's presentation was I found myself thinking a lot about how game theory, and I guess I should have asked this earlier, like how different it is, or like what are the different aspects of designing something for kind of tactile in-person experience and designing something for like a game online, because online you kind of, there's this like clickbait culture almost, where it's like whatever grabs the most attention keeps you engaged the most, which is why like TikTok has gone off, right? And so I just found myself thinking a lot about that.
Mm-hmm. Comments from anyone? So good. So I think I think we should move into ideation. I think because I think we are under the challenge that we are all in different time zones, and that we are all sort of in different pieces of work. I'll just share my screen here, and because we have a bit, we had planned. I'm sorry. See if I can do that. We had planned to do a few exercises here. Let's see how many we are actually left to do that. I think we're enough to get it rolling, depending if we can all. So those of you who are actually on the call now, how many of you can stay for about an hour? Show of hands. Okay, we'll get moving. Otherwise, we'll simply have to move it all. Yeah, we'll have to move it all to online. I'll talk into what I want to do and what I wanted to do to get us further. And we'll just use this explanation and share it. and then we'll probably have to just work slightly differently. So rather than doing the ideation, all of the ideation here, we'll do the ideation online, and we'll set up some time slots for people to kick in. So you know, we've developed, as part of the work here, we've developed, and we've actually tried that with a few banks that we've worked with, sort of a decision frame or a question frame. So and the idea is that and I'm just saying this as part of the inspiration for our work. The idea being that in your work or in your product development, in your sort of business plan making, you will have to sort of stop and realize sort of ethical challenges, or consider ethical challenges to the work that you're doing. And what we want to do here is sort of promote an understanding and a learning and a process for that. And what we've developed here is a decision frame that allows you to sort of consider the ethical challenges that you meet as part of your work. So that's about understanding it, sort of recognizing, analyzing, formulating approaches, and then developing and reflecting on that. And more specifically, our sort of work process for relating to an ethical dilemma is through an exploration frame that we developed, and we've actually used this with a number of banks. And so the idea that we've done for the workshop game that we've been talking about, so that's bringing together a group of people from a bank or an insurance company or another company, has been to confront them with any one of the ethical dilemmas that you have developed. So as part of the game, or as part of in this case the workshop that we did, they will be confronted with a dilemma, one of your templates, and then they'll be taken through such an exploration loop. And that is in essence a game. That's a simulation game, prompting them to consider the ethical challenges of the work that they're doing there. So taking them through sort of, you know, what is the problem, describing in their own words what they're seeing, and then we've used 3 schools of ethics: duty, consequential ethics, and virtue ethics, to explore, and then taken sort of questions out of those schools of ethics to explore their ethical values or their ethical decision, and allow them to reach a decision. And we've integrated the corporate values from those companies into this exploration, and then that will allow them to reach a decision. So that has essentially been the game. And in the PowerPoint that I'll share here, there's a bit more sort of slides on that sort of workshop session. And so just as inspiration, this could be a part of such a game. Let's see how many. I'll just stop sharing screen here for a second. So we are Katarina, Andrew, Martin. I think you indicated that you also had to leave.
Yes, Søren, maybe I'll do it the next time. Huh?
Okay, and then, but that means Akachi, Yemisi, will you be able to stay with us for a little bit longer?
Okay, I won't be able to stay till
No.
the next hour, maybe like 30 minutes. Okay, I can still hang on.
Let's do but that's fine. Let's do a brief sweep into it, and then we'll follow up in the next workshop and online. We are trying to mitigate time zones and all the work that you're doing in so I wanted us to warm up, and you can just add in your chats any of the answers to any sort of reaction to this. What do you like in a game? What is important for you in a game? Which is the game that you actually prefer? What is your favorite game? And is there experience from those that we can use when we consider that? Just add in the chat as we speak, what is it that makes you play? What do you like in a game? Yes, winning is good. The competitive spirit is probably important as we design a game. Favorite games. I'll add in my own. And what do you think when you look at it? And let's start to emphasize what do you think? I mean, we are talking about a game here that will be played for learning by people in financial institutions. So people who are working in different roles in banks and or insurance companies that will use a platform to learn. So let's try to sort of consider what will drive such a yes, Angry Bird is good. Such a gaming. What is the concept and the setting for those? So if we have, I wanted to do 2 exercises here now, right? So one, a little bit about, sorry, who our players are, when they'll use a board game, and what will keep them in a game, and how, you know. So the intention of this was simply to do sort of basic ideation and try to describe a little bit the lay of the land and the context for games. So that would be the emphasizing part, and then the next sort of thing would be to look, okay, what could a game then look like? You know, to meet that, then to start to ideating, so just, you know, the basic elements of a design process. So who are our players? What is the context that they are in? What will make a game interesting to them? How should we do it? How could we sort of develop that? And then what would such a game actually be? And how could we imagine such a game? Katarina and Tormod has set us perfectly off in this, and there are so many. I've listed just a few of them here. Catan, Monopoly, and you know, you can definitely see Trivial Pursuit and Pictionary, some of those, Cards Against Humanity. I don't know if you know that, but there are so many. There's so much on that. We've set up Miro, so let's see. I'll stop sharing my screen, and then see if we can integrate the Miro platform here. I'm inviting all of you, and I hope that you can actually see, or perhaps Andrew, and if you can't access the Miro that we have up, did you get an invitation, and can you actually get on the board? Miro and Zoom have made an integration, but it's not always it works because, yeah, many of you will probably be prevented by local rulemaking. So maybe can you share the Miro board in the link to the Miro board, Andrew, in the chat?
Yeah, the link to our board is in the chat here. Let me know if you're having any trouble with it, and I might be able to email you a link directly. But this link in the chat should work.
So I can see Andrew is in the Miro board. Yay, more of you are there. Okay. I think sort of simply basically, if we can use sort of an open mic on Zoom, and then work with the okay, I'm sorry, I just closed myself. I just shut myself out of Miro. That doesn't really help the process. Yes, several of you are already in there. That's good. I think it should work. That we can use Miro and Zoom in parallel, and then let's do a quick session of trying to describe, empathizing a little bit what will be important for such a game. What kind of sort of context should we promote in making a game that people from the financial sector would want to use? What is their context? What would make this relevant and important for people to play such a game? Can we list a little bit who are our players? Can we take? Let's take just 5 minutes and use. I mean, you know Miro. Use yellow pads or just write directly up here. And simply add in any ideas you have for what a game could be, how we could develop that, and any sort of input on the players. What would be relevant? How would we make such a game fun? How would we make it inviting? When could people use a board game? How do we keep them in the game? What could make them reflect? Following up from what Toma talked about or what Katarina talked about, or do we have any sort of concrete ideas for a game? Just ideas. We're not talking about a final game, but anything that any reflections you have. I don't know if you can hear the ticking behind me. It's not a clock counting down. It's a Chinese fortune cat that is solar powered and it's waving when the sun is shining. So it just makes a lot of noise, but the ticking just made me so I know we are running out of time. This really looks good. I think why don't we sort of continue adding ideas up, but then because I know and respect that we all have to also be elsewhere, and that there's a limit on the time. So I think you should continue adding to the boards here, but then let's start discussing what's on there, and add a few words to what you have put on, or what you have added on the Miro board. Anyone keen to start and introducing some of the ideas you have up here?
Can I start?
Yep.
Okay, I think it's just three things I put basically in terms of ideas. Participants, well, I mean, it might be a wider group, but the immediate group, group of actors I'm thinking of, yeah, the bankers, the people, the bankers, then the fintechs, just to help them see that the apps they develop, the things they develop, there's an ethical dimension to it.
Mhm.
There are ethical implications, and then those in business schools, the MBA is just, as part of their training to just, help them appreciate some of the wider context of, the learning, that it's not just enough to deploy a technology, but to also realize that there are ethical considerations attached to the use of these technologies. And then, okay, in terms of format, because, well, it's finances, I'm thinking maybe drawing some inspiration from, I don't know if you've watched, probably we've heard about or watched the movie Slumdog Millionaire.
Mhm.
So it's more or less like, so you have someone in the hot seat, and then you have to think of questions. I mean, the questions are posed, and then you have lifelines, you have all sorts of things that can just sort of help you try to answer the question. So it could just be something like that. So the participants could be, arranged in teams, maybe, I don't know, as many teams as you can. Then you just have this ethical scenario that is portrayed. There'll be imagery, there can be sounds, music at the back, just to create some kind of engagement with the audience. And then maybe there's a timer. So I don't know if that might work, just to help them say, okay, you are in a situation where this is, you just have a few minutes to think about this, and, what would be your, initial reaction, or what do you think about this? So, putting them in that kind of hot seat would, I think would ensure some sort of engagement, continued engagement with the game. And then at the end of it, I don't know, maybe to say, either this is the right answer or this is the wrong answer, or to defer it till after the entire game, or not to even put that at all. I don't know, but I think because we're talking about ethics and we want people to know that, there's a certain way to go about doing things, I don't know, we might want to consider that, whether we want to put that in, but that's just the idea basically. So I think I'm done with my own ideas, initial ideas. That's about it. Over to anyone else.
Really good insights and ideas. So any reflections or comments from any of the others on that?
I really like your idea, Yemisi, of having a hot seat with maybe a timer or something to make people really feel like their decisions that they're making have high stakes, and to make them think about it that way. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not muted. So I also really like the Slumdog Millionaire idea.
Yeah. Extremely. So, and just keep no point in. I mean, we're so few on the call, so you don't have to mute yourself. Let's just talk and have the conversation flowing.
Okay.
And we only have 15 minutes left, right? Because I think you have to leave at 6 p.m. Nigeria time, right? That's in 15 minutes, as I think, isn't that right?
Well, actually, maybe like in another 10 minutes or so. I'd
Okay,
have to-
yeah. So we'll just accelerate through this. Who's next and ready to share some of your work?
Yeah, greetings everyone.
Hi.
Okay, thank you, Soren. I was just looking at the ethics from the background of the financial services sector.
Yeah.
We look at the banks, the insurance companies, the stockbrokers,
yeah,
the pension funds, and the mortgage houses. I'm looking at probably a waterlogged game, done as Scrabble. And in this waterlogged game, we're going to look at words that pertains to ethics, word that pertains to, that moral behavior that impinges on the behaviors of bankers, insurance companies, and the rest of people in the financial services sector. The essence to begin to understand that most of the products they deploy to the market, but actually those products are actually satisfying what they should be doing. Are there any ethical issues or ethical dilemmas, underlying those products? So at the end of the game, I'm looking at probably the participant that is able to play words that have more ethical dilemmas becomes a winner in the game. That's what I'm getting at this moment. Because games tailor towards Scrabbles, but mainly on ethical words and moral behaviors.
Yep.
In that sector. Sorry, I'm not sharing my pictures or my video.
No problem. Yeah. Was I any reactions?
No, I was just recognizing that two people had ideas around Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah.
That's it.
That sounds good. So next, other ideas up here to add comments to?
Yeah, I have two ideas left.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is based on so I imagine it like an escape room game, and then you get the task, and similar to what Toma and Perry said, that you would have then to play through the scenarios, or pretty similar to what he gives his students. And I think that the setting of an escape room would make it really impressive. And I see two scenarios there. So maybe it would even be more interesting to have to behave unethically and then see the results of it at the end. Like, I think that would be really impressive and would actually make people behave more ethically in the end, maybe. Yeah, so like, for example, if you don't, like he said, if you don't play the whistleblower, and then in the end the result is that okay, now 3 of your colleagues have lost your job, and someone's life has ended, like something like that. And then people would recognize, okay, wow, I have to behave ethically. So that would be the first idea. And the second one, so it's something where I can actually imagine my my banker friends playing that. And that's so imagine it to be similar to Cards Against Humanity, and a lot of people play it when they are in a group and they drink together, and then at some point someone brings out Cards Against Humanities, Cards Against Humanity, and so what I would imagine it to be is based on our dilemmas. Certain words, like for example, banks and data leakage or something like that, and then you have some sort of sentences and these go together, or you then have a wild scenario or crazy scenario. What would happen if banks had a huge data leakage? And yeah, kind of maybe it's very dystopian, but I think maybe it would be fun to think about the very bad scenarios that happen from from the dark side of ethicals in AI.
Good. Yeah, super good observations and ideas. Making it raising the stakes, sort of and making it concrete and illustrating also what the outcome is, and a good idea to drive people towards sort of doing perhaps unethical and see what the reactions or what the consequences could be there. Other ideas?
I had the idea of maybe giving people defined roles that they had to then act in the interest of. For example, maybe if we're imagining a group of bankers are playing this game, some of them might have to put themselves into the perspective of a customer or of a stakeholder rather than their actual position. And then in those roles, working either cooperatively or semi-cooperatively or against each other in teams to show how those different interests interact.
Great idea. Any immediate reaction?
Yeah, I love that. That's the immediate reaction.
Yeah.
I think for both sides, maybe like you could get a reward when you in that setting when you behave ethically, and like that would be a learning. Or maybe you get some other learning which I'm not thinking of currently. And on the other hand, if I imagine it to be really hard to play a game with your friends or colleagues and you're like the bad guy, and I think you learn from that feeling as well.
I think it's a good idea as well, to actually have people take on other roles apart from what they're originally accustomed to, because sometimes people don't actually get to appreciate the impact of their actions until when they find themselves wearing another person's shoes, and then they suddenly think, oh, I actually never thought of it that way. So I just think in terms of speaking to Elise's point of, whether there will be behavior change, I think this might be, a way to sort of without, just letting them know that just think about it, put yourself in this shoe. And I think it would make an impact in terms of, making people empathetic, when they have to put themselves in the customer's shoes. And I think also the idea of having, the reverse side of, okay, let's do it the other way. So let's show you the, the implications of not doing things the right way. It's good. And maybe if we have time, maybe to stretch it a little further and then play the devil's advocate, because there's some people that even when you're telling them that, or you're showing them the implications of their actions, especially the negative consequences, they still want to argue and say, sometimes like you can say this is permitted under the law, but something can be permitted under the law doesn't mean that it's ethically right. So, just to play that, so just maybe we could just put in that little bit, just like sort of like control distraction, just to, because there's some people who really won't give up without a fight. So occasionally you could just introduce that into the game, you know, where, okay, let's have a stretch of a bit, you know, a stretch of imagination, like just have like someone argues and says, but I did the right thing. It doesn't, I just think it shouldn't be a regular feature, but occasionally just to satisfy the daredevil sometimes in a group that, yeah, you know, you can only push your luck this far, and, you know, so much. So, you know, that's just my own thinking.
Yeah.
You know, great ideas.
I think we have a really good beginning here. Those are extremely good ideas and really good thoughts and considerations. And so we are running out of time, of course, and so we have to realize. I mean, there's a lot of constraints to the process here. And it's certainly not an easy process to do a tactile board game on Zoom and Miro and all that. But I think it's possible because we already have so many, even in this small group, so many good ideas. So. You know, the process here will, you know, take us through some kind of guided step through ideation and then into prototyping. And of course, our prototypes won't involve so many spaghetti sticks, but we can describe it. And what I think is probably useful is that we use the Miro, and then we sort of transition into something where we can use sort of PowerPoint and perhaps more text to describe what we're using. Let's try and make it simple. The simple thing, or the simple process of developing that sort of prototype or minimal viable product really is just making things that are easy, just drawing, and we can also simply do that because I think we need to envisage some characters, a setting, and then draw that. So we'll do a process that where we'll have some workshops, and we realize that you won't all be able to participate in everything all the time. So we'll just cater to that. So we'll have the Miro board up and accessible, and we can all work on that. We can use the chats we have on WhatsApp and elsewhere, and then simply do that. Then we are inviting in for a few meetings as we go forward. And then I'm sure between us, some will have more time and interest to dedicate, and maybe we'll have a sort of a core team of some who have more time. But have an inclusive process where we use the ideas that we can all bring in, and then we'll add a project lead to it to help facilitate and make sure that we have all that. So that's just the very sort of loose and open process that we'll work on. We have so much going for us, and we have so much basis here that I think that should really be possible, and I really look forward to working with any of you who have time and interest in pushing this forward, and then do something that's fun and interesting, and that people will actually want to play, rather than those awful compliance trainings that I tried at IBM. So it is possible to do something that's fun. Because I think we have to leave. We have to leave and end now. Any comments? Any reactions on the process? Is it possible? Do you think it would be possible to do something, also working on Miro and as we do from all corners of the world?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I interrupted someone. Who did I interrupt? Sorry.
I said it's possible. It's very possible. We'll do our best.
Okay, we'll set up the platforms, and we'll use Miro and try to integrate it. Katarina, thank you for your wonderful introduction. It was really relevant, really wonderful, really good insights. We'll share your PowerPoint and look forward to following up also on that.
Will you share it, or then or should I? Like, I mean, if you do it, I think.
If you want to, and
sorry.
if you want to add any words to it, you are very welcome to do it. Otherwise, Andrew or I will just share it in the follow-up here. But we are easy to open to do both.
No, that would be amazing. Thank you. That would be
Great.
the best case for me.
Good. So good to see you all again. So we'll following up from this, we'll share the presentations, including Thomas and the talks that you gave, Katarina and Thomas, and we'll sort of develop some guidelines for how we can work in this online project scenario that we have going forward. A lot of workarounds, but we'll find a way to digitize spaghetti sticks and rubber bands somehow. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all for participating. It was really good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
See you again then. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
I think that went well.
I think it went okay. So yeah, I mean, both Katarina and Thomas were really good, and I think we got it started. So yeah, I mean, obviously the challenge will be how many can we involve in it, and how can we do this online?
Yeah, so I'll work on that today. I can send a follow-up to everybody with the recording, both presentations, and then I'll try and organize the Miro so that it's easier to work with